Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shubh, and together with my partner and co host Patrick, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Hey, Patrick, we're back for another episode. Believe it or not, for this one, I'm actually keeping track of the number. I think I lost my way a little bit. This is episode number 45, believe it or not.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's how long we've kept this going. I just remembered, and we'll obviously keep tabs on this towards the end of the year. When we recorded our final episode for 2023, I think both you and I had made predictions on where we'll end up at 2024. I think you had made a prediction that we'll be around 50. And for some reason, I made the prediction that we'll be around 60. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not feeling very confident about my prediction right now.
I mean, going with the lower prediction here gives me the control of actually achieving mine and not achieving yours. So good for me.
That was as good of a segue I could think of in the one less than a minute we had while the podcast was going live. But perhaps
Well
it
done.
sets me up very nicely since we're talking about projecting and taking things forward based on what's already been done. So this one, we're going to mix things up a little bit. It'll perhaps be more abstract, but also more philosophical in nature than most of our other discussions. I mean, believe it or not, maybe you and I are even half capable of philosophical discussions, Patrick.
In Germany, when you do your high school graduation, you
Hmm.
actually in your high school graduation you have two majors and two minors.
Okay.
Um, and my minor was actually philosophy.
Oh, really? That is
Mhm.
super cool.
Yeah,
I think my respect for you just went up half a notch, a tiny,
nice,
tiny bit. Yeah,
nice. That makes it 1.5%.
exactly, exactly.
So,
So
what is the topic?
the interesting thing, and I'll start with a very unusual place, and maybe the point will become clearer. So maybe instead of introducing the topic, I would like to lead in with a very bizarre setting through science experiments just to drive home a point, right? So our listeners and viewers, bear with me if I'm being a tease here. So, I was listening to someone, I mean, not related to investing, not related to startups or venture capital. It was more like a way to demonstrate complexity of simple things through science and maths, right? So the person was talking about how if you wanted to train rats to just pick odd numbers or even numbers, it's actually a very straightforward training regime, right?
Okay.
And with a little bit more complexity added to the training regime, it's actually also fairly simple to train rats to pick multiples of three. So, for example, if you stack the numbers, for example, if you had units of different items, a rat could, for example, recognize 3, 6, 9, 12, and so on,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
Odd and even, apparently, it's actually fairly easy to train rats to recognize odd and even numbers. Uh, and at this point, our viewers are thinking, okay, this sounds pretty random and not particularly interesting.
Is it already beer o'clock at Fundamental? That's what people are
Yes.
thinking right now.
Is this what you talk about when you get too old? Right? But get this. So I think each of us is quite familiar with multiples of two, multiples of three, etc. Now, suppose if you just make a minor tweak, and the person asked, would it ever be possible to train a rat to pick out prime numbers in an increasing order? And as anyone listening to us would realize, the conclusion pretty soon was it's impossible at any scale, right? And that is, of course, because that is also true for humans. If you tasked a human with finding, identifying prime numbers in an increasing order or chronologically, most humans, in a significantly vast majority of humans, will run out of their ability to identify the next prime number very, very quickly.
And I remarked to this remarked this before. It's actually a
Mhm.
mathematically unsolved problem to
Hmm.
identify the next prime number
Yeah.
reliably. It is
Yes.
impossible to do.
Yeah. So the incredible dichotomy or paradox here is the concept of a prime number, of course, is very simple. By the way, I hope all our viewers know what a prime number is, but if not, just to recap, a prime number is a number which is only divisible by one and itself, and no other number, um, no other natural number, I should say, other than that. So the concept is actually very simple, but extremely hard to actually identify at any sort of scale. And that is actually what we're going to talk about in this episode. Quite often, what we've seen, and we've seen this actually increasing in the contrast as well as, I would say, lunacy over the years, where quite often at fundamental, we have come to recognize this concept of what we refer to as an execution moat. That is a moat or a strength of the company or founders that is attributed to their ability to execute. Many VCs hold the view that there is no such thing as an execution mode, right? It's simply, we're just glorifying like a grind culture, or maybe someone just doing regular stuff, traditional things, and so on. Moats lie in stuff like technology, IP, and other sorts of things which are usually described as an unfair advantage. But at least in traditional venture thinking, there is no such thing as an execution mode, right? I wonder if the example of this prime number test perhaps says, hey, just because something is simple, repeating it doesn't make it a trivial aspect of execution.
This is more than a metaphor.
Mhm.
So, in the 30 seconds of preparing for this, when you brought the topic up, my mind first went for, hey, it's a cool metaphor. Let's
Mhm.
see how we can run with it. But actually, it's not a metaphor.
Mhm.
It is an actual transferable example into the space of venture founding and venture investing.
Mhm.
Because mathematics is supposed to be controllable and predictable.
Mhm.
And yet here we are knowing that not everything in mathematics is actually controllable and predictable.
Yeah.
So this is the point we're making. If something as controllable and as predictable, as logical,
Mhm.
as foreseeable and forecastable as mathematics is not entirely, why should we think that the uncontrollable or less controllable part of venture founding and venture investing should be so controllable to a degree that when we found or when we invest, we can already predict what the eventual mode should be?
Mhm.
And shouldn't that place actually a premium on the person to run with what's controllable today and execute the hell out of it until we run out of that and then see what happens next? Because that is the point about the prime number and why it's a mathematically unsolvable problem to predict all the prime numbers out.
Yeah.
Apart from, is, hey, you can only, if at all, get to the next prime number.
Mhm.
So once I
Exactly.
have it, I need to crack the next problem. That's the point, right?
Yes.
So I have to say, I found that very, very inspiring, and it's way more than a metaphor for me. Here's an anecdote. I had a catch up meeting with one of our portfolio teams today, and during the meeting, we had reviewed like what is going on, how's the product doing, how's the business doing, etc. And we're short of making a new product release. The business is going very well, and we just didn't have much more to discuss because the deadline is looming on a new product release. It's like everybody knows how to be laser focused and what they ought to do. And so I used some space in the meeting then and asked them, hey, what category are we creating?
Mhm.
And it triggered a pretty cool conversation, um, you know, where first the founders went and said, we know what we are today. We probably know what we're going to be next year. But actually, what we're going to be after that, it could be something that we aren't even aware of. So they asked me, so, what do you think? I said,
Mhm.
well, about category creation, another way to express how to build or how to create a category is if you express yourself as what else will our customers do with X? And
Mm-hmm.
X can be our technology, our product, the network that we provide, the brand, the track record, whatever asset gives your customers some power, that
Mm-hmm.
can be X. So what else can our customers do with X? And the reason why that applies to this discussion is because our customers, that's predictable. We know them, they know us. X is predictable. We know them, they know us. What's unpredictable among these two predictable things is how the recombination could
Mm-hmm.
happen in the future. And so that was sparking a really cool conversation. And you and I, we have a few examples later how how this expression can be used for category creation. But the point is to bring it back home to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even try to predict what you're going to be in 10 years, because if you can't even execute now, that is
Yeah.
completely worthless. And vice versa, if you can execute now, that is very, very valuable.
Yeah, and just to build on top of what you said, if you as a founder or as a firm somehow have the ability to consistently and predictably go higher from point A to point B to point C, that naturally, in our opinion, results in an edge that allows you to keep progressing further and further at hopefully greater scale, which by itself is an unfair advantage and a moat, even though many others may trivialize it to say you're just going through the motions.
So what you're saying is, hey, executing today is difficult, but executing my business at a higher complexity level. So the more I execute, the more complexity I will add,
Yes.
and the more I will have to execute to master that complexity.
And given that I have actually demonstrated a consistent track record of executing well at increasing complexity and scale, the probability that I will execute the next step successfully increases or improves.
Got it. And that's why, in itself, it can actually be a mode to master
Correct.
complexity. I mean, if you think about it in a way, many of the B2B marketplaces that we have seen successful in construction, they start with a relatively higher level of complexity, even if they do one, two, or three categories. To master the supply chain, there's a lot of variables. That's part of
Yes.
the value that you provide.
Exactly. And I mean, now someone may say, hey, you know what? For a certain set of categories, the problems you're solving in the supply chain is very different from, say, a different set of categories in the same building materials range or arena, which is true, not denying that. But the fact that you've built a track record, I mean, it's something, of course, we've spoken about in other episodes. And you've sort of gone through this journey as a firm that has been tested, proven that you can operate at a certain scale, prove the model out, actually, firstly, makes you, I guess, using a very loose metaphor, makes you battle hardened, having gone through and been pressure tested, and more likely that your existing customers will see you as like a trusted ally to do something else with. Referencing what you, of course, said about this portfolio company of ours, who, what else can we do with X?
So
Sort of.
I have a question here for you, but I
Mhm.
want to state an observation first.
Mhm.
So I keep telling our colleagues, and they must be by now completely deaf to what when I say this.
I mean, they're only slightly more deaf than, or less deaf than I am to what you
Great.
said. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. That is that I consider that my biggest accomplishment.
Yes.
Um, but I keep saying that the most underrated skill, and unfortunately one of the rarest skills in mankind, is prioritization.
Hmm.
And the other thing that I have noticed about mankind and business life is an equally rare and equally valuable skill is the ability to be consistent in your behavior.
Yes. Agree.
Mankind is very bad at prioritizing, and it is very bad at being consistent.
Hmm.
Isn't that another expression of execution?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're right. If you combine the two, that translates into your ability to keep going from one step to the other in a repeated fashion and doing it without any breakage in your success rate. That itself is a, I mean, I think it's a tremendous proxy for success. I mean, how many firms that we know in our everyday life that you can rest assured that at 10x, 100x, 10,000x their current scale, it'll only get better. And they'll keep repeatedly delivering better and better stuff at increasing scale.
Now I actually have an example in my mind that perfectly encapsulates what we're saying into a specific portfolio company
Okay.
of mine. I will not mention the portfolio company because Practical Nerds is not about plugging. It's not about, we're not pushing portfolio companies. We're only discussing thoughts. So I will not name them.
Hmm.
I have a portfolio company that is building, it's in the robotic space. And the founder was, before I invested, described to me by another investor that has known the founder for, I believe, 10 or 12 years, for a long, 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 long time, as that wasn't the exact words, but what came across was one of the craziest good people at prioritizing
Hmm.
and at building engines. Engines not in the mechanical engineering sense, but engines in the process
I see.
sense.
Hmm.
And to me, that was extremely appealing in a robotics company in construction. This company goes after a super specific vertical and workflow initially.
Hmm.
And if I had approached it from a more traditional venture mindset, I would have said, well, is the market really not large enough? Or I would have said something like, but what is the company going to be in 5 years?
Yeah.
You know, these things are being said a lot in venture circles.
Yeah.
None of the two. But that was because the founder was framed to me in the right way. And so I took that and I saw a founder, or I believed I saw a founder, and I think I have been confirmed by him more than I could have imagined.
Hmm.
I saw someone that in the end would not build a robotics company, but that would build a robotics platform, a robotics engine
Hmm.
that cannot predict to me what the next workflow or the next vertical will be that they will go after 2, 3, or 5 years after our first investment. We're now
Yeah.
in the company for, I think, 2 years, but that can absolutely make it predictable for me that he will have an engine to go after the next category,
Hmm.
the next workflow,
Yes.
etc. And one expression of that is the way he has prioritized the engineering side is exceptionally capital efficient and is very componentized. It's a
Hmm.
product type way of thinking about it. So he built a tower. The tower can be repurposed for another workflow. He
Okay.
built an arm. He built a feeder engine, right? So, and so on and so forth. And on top of that lies software, 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 software. And so it comes from this platformy component. Sorry, it comes from this prioritization and the ability to build this kind of engineering process that he's built this inventory of components that can be repurposed. And that makes it X-fold more likely that we can go after a new category or a new workflow as we discover it. So that is the point I'm trying to make is actually, hey, if you're great at prioritizing and if you're great at doing something consistently, in this case, the process of how to actually engineer,
Yeah.
you're giving yourself a much higher chance to discover the next thing, the
Hmm.
next prime number
Yeah.
that you ought to be doing.
Absolutely. I mean, look, in an extremely dumbed down way, although I must confess that is not what I intended when I started off this discussion about prime numbers. It's also, in some ways, isn't this also what lies at the heart of the ability to compound forever? To be able to constantly repeat what you're doing and just keep building on it over and over again so that you always grow at hopefully the same rate or maybe an increasing rate, and you're able to do it even at large scale, and your ability to compound is not constrained or not the result of having a small base effect.
What you're describing, I think, is what Albert Einstein called the strongest force in the universe, and that is compound interest.
That is right. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, at the heart of it, in my opinion, whether you're a founder or an investor, what you're looking essentially is to keep compounding on yourself or on your investment. And again, how you choose to do it, it's up to everyone has their own source of unfair advantage. But I think, in my opinion, execution mode sort of captures it. The ability to consistently keep repeating it, that by itself is a, again, some of our viewers and listeners may be like, hey, what are they saying? What is the big deal in just repeating what's been happening? You'll be surprised how rare it is.
It is.
Yeah,
It
it's
really, really is.
incredibly rare.
We have in the portfolio, so of course, Inframarket, I think for us has been a an early demonstrator of that. I would say
Mhm.
Shovek and Aditya fall absolutely into this category of very consistently
Yeah.
executing and prioritizing super well. Shub, you know this example. I will not name it. So I spoke about the robotics company. I have a marketplace business in Europe that for I want to say 2.5 years had they did have software, but if an outside investor had looked at it, they would have been like, meh,
Yeah.
hey, I'm a SaaS investor. Like, what is your software,
Yeah.
etc. But the founders have built an engine of how to develop the next category to source.
Hmm.
They haven't the power of that business lies not in the category that they source. The
Hmm.
power of that business lies in how do we identify and qualify the next category?
Yeah.
And that is an expression of prioritization and consistency. That's the
Mhm.
thing you can repeat. So
Yes.
theoretically, you don't even have to know what the next category is. You can, if that's what you execute and you're excellent at, and this
Mhm.
company is,
Yeah.
you can theoretically compound on that process and keep adding categories until you run out of categories.
Hmm. I mean, by the way, we've been talking a great deal about the importance of execution mode. Some of our listeners and viewers may be wondering, but how do we firstly judge for an execution mode, or what should founders do to sort of incorporate behaviors which help them eventually build capabilities of an execution mode? What would you say, Patrick?
Um, so two of the things we mentioned, but they might be difficult to judge in a meeting or even a year of working to each other. That's prioritization and consistency.
Hmm.
While they might, I will say this, it might be unpopular, but I think it will apply. So they are rare in 99% of the population anyway, and less life experience, less business experience will make them even rarer. These are skills that get honed with more experience. They are not necessarily you're not born with them only. You also need to gain routine and prioritization. You need to get, it's like nobody's born with the ability to play the violin perfectly.
Yeah.
If that were the case, we would see babies playing the violin.
Yeah.
Even if you're a genius at 5 year old, being perfect at playing the violin, it still comes from routine and
Yeah.
repetition. So these are unfortunately the truth. So you will be a little bit more likely to be in the 1%, the more experience, repetition in life and in business you will have gained in these two skills. So
Mhm.
prioritization and consistency are two important ones for me. What is it for you?
I think what I would add is, in my opinion, the founders where I've observed the greatest signs of execution mode and the repeatability, consistency, is it's very well they have this obsession with measuring and reporting stuff to a great level of detail. I think we may have talked about this in one or two of our other episodes previously, but again, stating the obvious, it's hard to repeat something consistently and often enough if you're not measuring and reporting it and being not holding yourself accountable for it.
Yes.
If you also, for example, think that abstract statements about either what you're building or the technology, etc., is good enough as progress, you are probably not likely to be building an execution mode because the standard is too low, and it's not, you're not holding up to a standard which can be measured on whether it is being repeated or not.
Oh man, I have a funny anecdote here. I will pay
Okay.
for this weekend.
Mhm.
Um, um, in lean they say, hey, you can't control what you can't measure. Another way to
Yes.
express the same thing is, hey, you can't repeat
Yeah.
what you can't measure. So
Absolutely.
my wife is a fantastic cook. I really love it.
Okay.
But man, she is absolutely, love her to death. 21 years together. I love you, honey. But I keep telling her, hey, this tasted great. Have you written down the ingredients and the measures? No. Why not? It's not how I do it. So I'm asking myself, okay, so how are you going to repeat this meal that it tasted great? I mean, somehow she kind of manages. and maybe my senses are not attuned to noticing the difference that much. But it's sort of right. It's
Mhm.
funny. I mean, I can't expect it to be consistent that way if I actually don't write it down and then
Yeah.
I repeat the exact same recipe again.
Yeah. I mean, again, someone listening to this may say, hey, so your great insight is, oh, we just report and measure it. Again, I cannot stress this enough.
It can never get done.
You'll be amazed how few people do this.
Yeah, yeah.
It's unbelievable how few people do this.
And that in itself, by the way, is consistency, which is painful.
Yeah.
I mean, they say about football players in the NFL, it takes no talent to be an NFL player. Now, it takes talent for sure to
Hmm.
be, one of the 32 starting quarterbacks. There is a
Yeah.
talent aspect to it. But just to be a player in the NFL doesn't take talent. All it takes is for you, for 16 years, age 5 to 21, to show up every morning to practice and
Yeah.
practice the hell out of it with absolute insane energy, and then to watch your film, watch your video, and
Mhm.
hone your craft. You know how difficult that is for 16 years to have that level of consistency into your craft?
Mhm.
That is. And so that's the point. So these, whatever it is, 1,600 NFL players, or however many, um, most of them are not there because they are otherworldly talented. There will be 10,000 or 50,000 other people who might have the exact same talent, but what differentiates them is the consistency.
Yeah. And I think what it also does, or what I've at least noticed the best founders do, is when you develop this very consistent and what others may think of as maniacal habit of documenting, consistently tracking, holding yourself to standards, you'll also find that if along the way there's bottlenecks or weaknesses, because you're obsessed on getting to the next point, like getting to the next milestone with the same level of consistency, you will remove these bottlenecks. And what happens is, in most companies which are in the, say, the 99 or the 99.9%, which are lacking execution mode, these bottlenecks are either not discovered or they're sort of tolerated, and sooner or later they kind of slow the business down and make it either less predictable or take away the execution mode from the company. And that is because again, as I mentioned, it's either not measured or there's no consistency in recognizing that this tiny thing, which today seems like an annoyance or an inconvenience, could at some point become the showstopper in the business continually compounding.
Now, that leads me to another skill that you probably need. So you can be consistently doing something wrong. You
Mhm.
can be consistently doing the wrong thing.
Yes.
So there is, I don't know, Shub, help me find the right word. So there is a level of almost um, outside your own body reflection and observation of what you're doing. Another way to express the same thing that I say to founders I work with, I admire in great founders the ability to ride the elevator. Riding
Mhm.
the elevator means you can go to the very top floor and you can look down at what you're doing from whatever, 1,000-foot
Yeah.
view, and you see the patterns, you see how everything fits into a bigger picture, how it might lead to a next step, to the
Mhm.
next prime number.
Yeah.
But then you also are able, as a great business person, you're able to ride the elevator to the basement, into the
Mhm.
nitty gritty. Hey, the generator in the basement currently is not working. This is the screw
Yes.
I need to turn. So if you can only do one of the two, you might be functioning in a founder team.
Hmm.
But ideally, and I would say all of the great founders that I have had the pleasure to work with have this elevator
Yeah.
riding ability.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's actually very interesting the way you lay it out, because you need to be in a position where you can take the elevator all the way down, but also take the elevator all the way up. The truly great founders know that for these two states to coexist and for the founder to be able to see both of them, they actually have this mindset that, hey, I need to make this work whatever it takes. And therefore usually every now and then they are open to either feedback or course correction or ways in which they can improve or remove bottlenecks, etc. So you're right, it does need humility, a sense of openness to being coached. It's a tricky line. Now, not we're not saying that become a pushover, etc., just because someone is giving you feedback. And obviously, there's a ton of crappy feedback given by VCs out there.
Oh yeah.
So we are not saying, hey, just randomly get on board whatever feedback you get from VCs. That's not the takeaway here. But presumably, if you are a founder who has the ability, again, running with your metaphor, going all the way down and all the way up, hopefully, sometimes if you visualize this journey, some feedback will resonate with you. And hopefully, you also have the humility to recognize that it is in your interest to incorporate that feedback and make those improvements.
I agree. Um, the elevator metaphor also has another implication that I admire in great founders. If you want to ride the elevator up, you want to look at whatever, my business, myself, how are we operating as a team? Are we doing the right things? Are we doing them the right way? What is the next thing that could follow? All of that perspective that you gain from the top of the elevator ride should be informed by what is going on in the basement. And so, if you only are able to stay at the top, you will actually lack the right information to make the decisions
Yeah.
at the top. One of the incumbent CEOs that I worked with and actually admire a lot, very, very execution driven kind of person, but super strong strategically, made it, led a 20 billion revenue
Okay.
company in, I don't know, 60 different countries.
Hmm.
That person made it a point to, and I worked directly for him. That
Okay.
person made it a point to never spend more than 2 weeks in the headquarters. And after that, go for a week on the road in one country and actually go onto a shop floor and see what's going on. And the way he would operate riding this elevator was he would then cut through the management layers. He would not trust what was being filtered to him. So he wouldn't ride the elevator mid-level down and then get out on the 30th floor
Yeah.
and see, hey, by the way, how is life on the 30th floor? No, he didn't care for that at all. He literally rode to the basement. And if the local management, sometimes in these big incumbents, when you do like a country visit, it can be like a foreign state visit. They have the entourage and coming along. He did not care for that at all. If the local management felt like they needed to do that, he would just ignore them. He would go to the person on the factory line and say, hey, describe to me what is happening. Literally, I have seen him do that. And
Nice.
that is fantastic. That is a skill you as a business leader want to have, because that is the epitome of riding the elevator. So now you get primary information from your business. And like you say, Shub, I mean, come on. This skill is easier if you lead 5 people sitting in
Yeah.
one room day one of your startup. It becomes very, very difficult
Yeah.
once you have 1 billion in revenue in your marketplace, or, once you have 10 million in ARR in your software company and your team sit, then it becomes very, very difficult. And you need to make this, again, a priority.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, just to be clear, we are not saying don't delegate, but we are also saying, hey, you also need the ability, again, to run with what you've been saying, to get really granular and down to the basics every now and then, which is right. Again, may seem like a very basic thing to say, but again, you'll be surprised how many scaled up companies or how few in how few of the scale up companies the founders or the leaders treat this seriously. It's
Yeah.
still quite surprising to me.
Now I wanna take the whole prime number and execution mode into one more direction. So in the last 2 weeks, there has been the widely publicized, I don't know what to call it, journey of the company Bolt,
Okay.
with the former founder, sort of being involved in a new financing offer for Bolt, allegedly 14 billion offer, where Bolt was previously valued at 11.5, I think,
Okay.
in some kind of convoluted deal. I don't want to comment on the deal. I don't want to comment on the circumstances of the founders not being the CEO anymore and now coming back, etc. That is not my point. The point is the following. Shub, do you know the ARR of Bolt?
I had not known, and I would have guessed a completely different number until I heard of it from you.
7 million is what's being reported.
That is insane.
So
Just okay. Just to be perfectly clear, I mean insanely low for a
Yeah.
company of that valuation.
How can you have an 11.5 billion valuation with 7 million ARR? That's a question. How can you even entertain? How
Yeah,
can you make someone even bid an offer of 14 billion
yeah.
valuation on a 7 million ARR? You asked me, hey, is this like shrunk in any way? So that's not how the articles made it sound. The
Mm.
articles made it sound like that's actually been the peak number.
Wow.
Okay.
That
So
is
why? I mean, in the context, execution mode, and why don't we place more premium on execution? Why do we as an investment community put so much premium, literally 7 million ARR, 14 billion or 11.5 billion valuation? That's called a premium, okay?
yeah,
Why do we put so much premium on what this company could become?
yeah.
I don't understand it, Shub. Like, what is going on in our investor mindsets that we don't value the actual execution and we put so much premium on the other things?
Again, just to bring it back from where we started, startups and business in general is actually very hard, and in that sense, it's analogous to going from one prime number to the next. I wonder if quite often we forget that as a profession, and we think we're just picking the next odd or even number, and that's how trivial it is. And therefore, we don't. We assume, oh, it's trivial to just. It's inevitable that you'll get to a much larger scale.
Yeah,
But
maybe you're right.
the empirical truth, which obviously all of us know, is actually very few companies get to significant scale, like really large scale, and much fewer companies stay there and grow from there. That is the truth.
I
And
mean, I would run with it. I would actually, I'm saying this on the record, and I'm sure that there will be VCs listening. Oh, sorry, there will be when VCs listen to this, that we were shaking their head. This guy doesn't, whatever.
yeah,
He doesn't get it. I will say the following. I would much, much rather have a portfolio full of $100 million valued companies that are net profitable
hmm,
than to have a portfolio full of companies that other investors would far value at a premium, hoping that eventually they become something.
hmm,
If I had to make a trade off choice between the two, I would go for the former. Now, luckily,
absolutely.
I don't have to make that choice.
Yeah, wholeheartedly in agreement with you and share the same opinion.
It's the power of compounding.
Yeah,
Interesting, no? And I mean, we talked about it the other day. Google it, you'll find the name. But one of the big LLM AI companies, whatever, negative gross margins,
yeah.
now getting valued at triple digit billion.
Hmm.
I mean, it's hard for me to understand. I have to say, like,
Yeah, crazy stuff, man.
maybe I can't compute the next prime number and these guys have. I don't know.
Hey, maybe that's the value. That's the value of being able to infinitely calculate prime numbers. I mean, that was in jest.
But yeah, but I mean, I think what it is more honestly in these cases, and that's damning, is the product is not the product. The product is the stock.
Yeah,
And so you're basically saying, hey, someone else will pay for the stock 200 billion next year.
correct.
So the product's not the product. The product's
Yeah.
the stock at that point.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if in that way you're trying to predict the next prime number, meaning, hey, the stock will be priced at that,
Yeah,
but as a derivative of, you know, demand in stock and not demand in the company's business.
exactly. Yeah.
In that sense, it could be rational, although it wouldn't be something that I would sign up for, I have to say. And by the way, I've been offered SPV opportunities on that company. I've deleted those emails.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very philosophical topics. Thanks for
Indeed.
sponsoring.
Indeed. Yeah, for those of you who think we can't mix it up with random philosophical stuff, there you go.
Nice. I'm already looking forward to the image generation for the episode.
Whole bunch of
Maybe
numbers, whole bunch of crazy numbers.
that, or I'll make something like René Descartes on a
Ah,
construction
yes.
site,
Yes.
Socrates on a construction site.
Socrates. Was he into numbers and prime numbers as well?
I don't know if he was into prime numbers, but he would qualify obviously for the philosophy game.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is true. Oh yeah,
No.
I like those two connections. Yeah,
Okay, let me get to that.
nice.
Awesome. Our little ritual here. I know these past few weeks you've been saying mysteriously one or two deals, I think in the manufacturing space broadly.
Yeah.
What's in your calendar for next week that excites you?
So I think I might have mentioned this in our previous episode. Uh, Interestingly, entering a phase where some of our earlier investments, I mean not that earlier, but some investments we had done earlier, entering a phase where they're raising more capital, etc. So quite involved with those discussions and processes. Also doing something, with reference to I believe episode number 43 in the context of new age building material brands. Also working with a company that fits that description. I'm happy to report, and I think hopefully we'll have more such opportunities in the future in that area as well. What about your week? Next week for you?
Um, I'm speaking on Monday to a firm that does GIS for underground mapping
Okay.
with a what I think is a very executable approach.
Hmm.
I'm quite excited about that meeting, I have to say.
Nice.
It could be nothing, it could be something pretty cool.
Okay, could be something to look forward to and discuss in our future episodes.
Yes, indeed. Cool. Well, Shub, I'll let you get back to your philosophy weekend,
Yeah,
and I'll see you next week.
I'll hunt some prime numbers this weekend.
Okay, everybody has their hobbies.
Yes.
Cheers.
Yeah. Bye bye.